Hello and welcome back to another episode of Cyber Voices, the official podcast of the Australian Information Security Association, otherwise known as AISA. I'm your host, as always, David Willett, and it is my pleasure to have you with us as we explore the diverse voices of the Australian cyber industry. Hello there, Cyber Voices community. Just a quick note before this episode begins. Today's guest discusses a topic that some people may find triggering or disturbing. It does revolve around child sex abuse material online and a particular program which is focused on deterring potential offenders. If the content of today's episode raises anything for you, please check out the list of support services provided by myself and my guest in the episode description. Welcome back to Cyber Voices, coming to you live from CyberCon Australia 2025 here in beautiful Melbourne. My name is David Willett, and sitting across from me today in the Cyber Voices booth on the expo floor is Joel Scanlan, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Tasmania. Joel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And you've just come from giving a talk as well, I believe.
Yeah, I've just come literally downstairs from giving my talk on CSAM deterrents.
CSAM deterrents, so... Educate me. What's CSAM deterrence?
Yeah, so CSAM is child sexual abuse material, and what we're seeing around the world, but I was talking very much in the Australian context, is increasing amounts of child sexual abuse material being on the platforms that we use, mainstream platforms, but obviously we talk a lot about the dark web as well, and I touched on that. But the primary focus of my talk was around how can we actually make sure our mainstream platforms are doing everything they can to, with safety by design, keep that material off our platforms, because people report when we interview offenders in prison and stuff, how did you first come across this? How did you find it? Or dark web surveys as well. Over 50% of them say they found it for the first time by accident on a mainstream platform. And that was sort of their exposure to this highly illegal content.
Wow. Yeah. And so the title of your talk, Creating an Internet Hostile to Child Abuse Material, makes sense in on itself, but after hearing that description, it makes a lot more sense, because what kind of mainstream platforms are we talking about here?
Yeah, so I started off my talk by talking about some of the numbers that we see. And so the AFP, who operates the ACE in Brisbane, which is the Australian Centre for Countering Child Exploitation, they recently announced that the numbers for the last financial year, and there was, I think, 83,000 reports of CSAM that related to Australia, either directly to the ACE in Brisbane or through the AFP channels, or from an international service that's called NCMEC, or National Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, which is out of the US, which is where all the mainstream platforms. Mm-hmm. So your Facebooks, your Googles, all the names we know, those household names.
Yeah.
If they detect content on their platform or it gets reported by users, they forward it to NCMEC. Mm-hmm. And in the last sort of their most recent report, which was actually for the calendar year 2024, they had over 20 million reports globally. And I think 70-odd thousand of those related to stuff originating from Australia.
You've mentioned here as well in sort of the synopsis of your talk that it seems that large tech firms are largely reticent to publicly share about the volume of warnings displayed or the effectiveness of dissuading users from accessing the content. Are they just not engaging with the subject?
Yeah, so this is a thing where we are actually starting to see a bit of a shift. They've increasingly engaged over the last decade or so. So if we consider big search providers, because they're actually really visible, if we think of Microsoft Bing and Google Search, they actually put up their first sort of warnings around people who search for that kind of content back in 2013. But they hadn't actually shared any data about that until earlier this year, and that was only at conferences, not published anywhere online. And so that's taken them effectively 12 years to get to that point. But what I actually spoke about for a fair chunk of my talk today was actually around an evaluation that we did at the University of Tasmania with Pornhub and people searching on that platform for CSAM. And we did an evaluation of that across like an 18-month period, in which, in that context, 2.8 million people in the UK alone searched for CSAM on Pornhub. And then they received a warning message and also a chatbot. And we were very much evaluating the effectiveness of that chatbot. Which it was more effective than just the warning message alone.
Yeah. So people are searching for this content on a platform like Pornhub. Is this content actually on Pornhub, though?
In a Pornhub context, the answer is almost probably certainly no.
Okay.
historically, if you do a bit of a Google and go, is there CSAM on Pornhub? You're going to see a bunch of articles from 5, 6, 7 years ago where there was illegal content on their platform. There was some class action lawsuits, which you can then read about. These days, in 2025, of those sort of mainstream adult services sorts of companies, that's probably one of the ones that there's probably not there. Their trust and safety team is strong because of the effect of having those lawsuits. That's not necessarily the same across that whole adult industry. But likewise, if we look at non-porn sites and look at the mainstream social media, we see, a company like Meta reporting millions a year through to NCMEC as they're taking it down. But that means it was there and active for a time. And so these companies are increasingly fighting to remove this from the platform because they don't want the news story about it being shared on their platform, which has happened a bunch of times. And so they're increasingly engaging, although your question was really around those numbers, right?
Mm-hmm, sure.
And so from a NCMEC perspective, which is as I said before, the National Centre to Counter Child Exploitation out of the US, the big companies report through to there and they publish numbers. So you can actually go to their website and see how many did Microsoft report, how many did Apple report, which is actually very few, only a couple of hundred. But you look at like a Meta, theirs is in the millions. They actually are very active and proactive in reporting. And so we do see some companies being a lot more open in what they're reporting. But in terms of effectiveness of warning messages, that's where the Pornhub study is the first of its kind.
Mm-hmm.
It's my understanding that actually Google is getting to the point of doing their first, which will probably come out next year. And so we're starting to see more of that. And I think we're seeing more of that because of what we're seeing in Australia with e-Safety Commission and then in the UK with Ofcom, which is their regulator, where they're requiring tech companies now to do a transparency report every sort of 6 months or so saying, what are you doing about harmful material on your platforms? Not just CSAM, but grooming and terror-related content and all those sorts of other things that we've seen in the news of late around, like a stabbing in Sydney that then was shared on social. Those transparency reports, they're having to demonstrate what safety measures are they doing. And so the warning messages that we do research into at UTAS are really around how effective are they? And that's what our research is in. They are effective. We're not at any point making the argument they are going to solve this problem. They're not. Yeah. At the end of the day, if we hear those numbers that I just said, 80-odd thousand in Australia, there's less than 20 victim ID specialists across the Australian Federal Police and state police across the country. A lot of those reports, it's really hard to go, where is this child? And so what we're needing to do is try to shrink that number. It's growing every year. It grew 30% last year. It was 40% higher the year before. So those numbers are going in the wrong direction. We're hoping with deterrence messaging and working with big tech platforms that people who might first get exposed to that and then start searching for it will get a warning message. Oh, yeah, no, I shouldn't search this. We don't want to grow this market any bigger. More than half of people report the first time they come across this content, it's by accident on a mainstream platform. And that's stuff we need to target, we need to change. And I think those big tech providers are doing a lot more work there. But around, how can we signpost them to support services like Stop It Now Australia, which is a service that's operated out of Melbourne, actually, which we're in Melbourne, that received some federal funding to operate a couple of months ago. For people who have got concerns about their thoughts towards children, they can call up and get free counselling and advice that's completely anonymous and they're not going to get prosecuted results. They work very hard to be anonymous because they're wanting to make sure that the people are nudged away from that content, that they're getting the help that they need to then not become an offender.
Right.
And so that's a key part of that warning message strategy is getting therapeutic messages that say, look, if you're concerned about your thoughts or feelings towards children, how about you get help? Here's where you can go and get free help and guidance and assistance.
Okay, yeah, because I was wondering what the context was around the warning messages. Yeah. I'm assuming that's not the case everywhere though, right? Like it's not everywhere saying like, hey, you can get help. I'm sure a lot of them are just like, yeah, this is illegal and you should not be doing it kind of stuff.
100%. So a lot of messages do have that very law enforcement bent to them.
Yeah.
Some of them are sort of, and a lot of the ones that we sort of work with tech parties to implement actually have a bit of both. So this is illegal, but you can get help. And trying to pair those two thoughts together so that they realize, oh, wait, yeah, I actually don't want the negative consequences of getting caught with this because this would actually destroy my life. I'd lose my job, my family, all down those sort of lists of sort of consequences. But also, I can actually get help. I'm not alone. I can actually reach out and get help. And so shrinking that offender pool is really what we're targeting to do because we're wanting tech providers to work hard on making sure that stuff's not on their platform.
Mm-hmm.
But if it is, or if we're talking about internet service providers, they're able to get block lists of known CSAM. And actually, that's a perfect time to put a warning message saying, hey, help's available, go get that. But even in Australia, about half of our ISPs don't really have a warning message there. It's a 404, can't find this page, which is a missed opportunity. And some of the others, their messagings could be improved as well. So in that context, Australia's actually a bit behind. If we look at the UK, which is often our best comparison, Commonwealth and all that, but also from a regulatory environment, we're very similar. All their ISPs have had a warning message in place since 2017, 2018. In Australia, we don't have a unified sort of space in that context, which is an opportunity that we need to do more in.
It's interesting to hear that that's the strategy. I don't think I've ever come across that, that reducing the number of potential offenders out there. It's an interesting strategy around harm prevention. But is on the other side of that, is there also a part of this with warning messages and the reporting, which is also around being able to stop people who are currently offending and make sure that, proper legal process occurs as a result of that. Yeah.
I guess what I would say around the sort of first part of your comment there is there's been some work around, how many offenders are we talking about in an Australian context? And there's a bunch of numbers out of the child maltreatment study, which is really interesting. Around 1 in 6 Australian males confess in response to the survey as having had sexual thoughts about children. We've got about 2.5% of the Australian males in response again in that survey, 2.5% adjusted for population, have knowingly looked for CSAM online. Mm-hmm. So if we just think 2.5% of Australian males, that's more. We can't arrest our way out of this problem. We actually need to have more societal change and community responding, going, this is not okay. Because also at the end of the day, we actually can't arrest all these people either, because we literally don't have the manpower for that. So we need to be doing more responses so that when people like law enforcement do knock on people's doors, it's the worst of the worst they're getting, that we want to actually make sure that people who are just a little bit curious get nudged away and they don't then
get the help they need.
Get the help they need and never have to interact with the criminal justice system, because it literally couldn't carry the load of 2.5% of all Australian males. Yeah. And also the net effect of then is shrinking the CSAM market, which then means less children are being harmed.
Yes,
and so we've got to constantly think about what are the steps we're doing. It's not necessarily, hey, lock them all up, because if we can't then be completely sort of apathetic and ignore the situation. We've got to respond so less children are being harmed.
I guess there's also that risk of if the police are going to show up at the door and we're going to come on down you with the full force of the law, then these people are probably just going to retreat deeper and become sneakier about what it is that they may be thinking about doing.
100%. Because at the end of the day, the people are on a trajectory of offending is sort of how we respond to it, that initially they might see something by accident and they get a bit curious and they sort of start going down that rabbit hole, and they're on the open web, they're on the Pornhub searching, trying to find it or whatever, a little bit curious. It's at that point we want to stop them, so they don't then progress to then go, oh, let's jump on the dark web or get into a Telegram group, all those other places that then just continue to grow that market of harm.
You've talked a little bit about the fact that we're probably a little bit far behind on the deterrence, and you've talked about what's working well overseas. What are some of the things that your research and the work that you're doing is advocating that we need to do more of?
Yeah, so the University of Tasmania, in partnership with Jesuit Social Services, who operate Stop It Now in Australia, we've actually partnered up to launch a thing called the CSAM Deterrent Centre, which is sort of a research-driven centre, but also very practice-focused with Stop It Now, where we're working with tech partners to design warning messages, to consider where they should be deployed. If we think of new modern services like generative AI, we see those are being used to not only make CSAM, but also to generate like grooming scripts and things like that through LLMs. So working with tech partners at whatever level of the stack, whether it's a DNS provider or an ISP, and we're just looking at banned URLs, or whether it's hash matching known CSAM or images or videos, there's a whole bunch of different points across that whole ecosystem of where different companies fit that could be doing something. And so the CSAM Deterrent Centre is looking to work with partners in the tech space, particularly, things like ISPs, DNS providers, those sorts of things. Social media around, well, are they looking for grooming detection? Are they checking all the images have got, hash matching, checking on it, but also things like hotels and free Wi-Fi. Like, that's a context where offending is occurring. Someone's in the hotel for work for a couple of days, they're away from the family. They then start, I'm going to start looking for some of this stuff. It's like, well, actually, that's a point that if someone's actually attempting to access known URLs, that block lists exist that can really easily be deployed. That's one, we could put the block lists in place, which often aren't, put them in place, and then also have a warning message there. And not saying, hey, the police is on the way, but hey, Stop It Now exists. Give them a call.
Yeah, are you concerned about this behaviour?
Exactly.
And it's a conversation I just don't think you ever hear in this space. I think this strategy is something so interesting just in terms of like, well, there are people out there who are having these thoughts and feelings, all judgment aside, let's focus on actually trying to help these individuals not go down this path before they get too far. So the deterrent side is really, really interesting. And we've been talking a lot about the offenders and all that. I do have to wonder, though, in all of this, the strategy around the actual victims in this space. Where do they come into this?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, the company, the organisation we interact with, Stop It Now Australia, is an offender-focused context.
Sure. Okay.
But across Australia, there's a range of support services like Bravehearts, for example, that's very victim-focused, and they actually literally sit on our advisory board for the CSAM Deterrent Centre. And so those victim voices are really important. And there's actually a range of different support services for child abuse survivors across the country. There's SAMPSON as well, which is then focused on male survivors. And so that's a really important piece to consider them. And with some of the warning messages work we've been doing, and a study that we've got coming out soon, published by the Australian Institute of Criminology when it gets published, is looking at adolescents and what kind of messaging do they need. And so that study that's coming out probably by Christmas has messages targeting offenders in there, but we've also got messages targeting victims. So they know, oh, wait, I'm not alone. I can reach out and get help.
Right. But
also then more importantly, and it's quite new and novel in this work that we're doing, is around bystanders as well. Bystanders is a warning message type that we all actually understand. We've all looked at a medicine bottle and it says, keep out of reach of children. We understand a bystander message. But if we then think of online harms and social harms more broadly, it's like, oh, hang on. If someone needs support, they need to go to someone that they trust. And if the bystanders are then actually aware of, oh, what services actually exist? How can I actually direct someone if I hear, oh, they're being groomed, where do I direct them to? Or their image is being shared without their consent. They need to know, oh, right, eSafety has a site you can go to get any imagery taken down that's being shared non-consensually. So all of that all fits together. While our primary focus is on those offender element of that, we're very well aware of the sort of victims and bystander role and are looking to also partner with tech companies that are willing to try something in that space to see at scale what kind of impact can we have with victim messaging.
Great. Well, that is really, really eye-opening. I do really appreciate the approach that you're taking at University of Tasmania. That's really interesting. And I would love to collect a lot of the links that you've spoken about. I think obviously our listeners, I think if anything of this from any angle has raised anything with you, we'll include some support links in the episode description for this as well. I
mean, the main one I'd throw out there, particularly if you work for a tech organisation, you're thinking, oh wait, we do provide internet, we could implement a warning, particularly around things like DNS blocking and that sort of stuff. CSAMdeterrents.com is the website. So I can send that through, but CSAMdeterrents.com, if you Google that, you'll find it.
Excellent. Well, Joel, thank you so much. I'll let you get out there and enjoy the rest of CyberCon. And thank you for sharing this important message with us and for sharing your voice with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cyber Voices. Our music is by Sanar Garut, our show artwork is by Studio Quarantine, and we record our show at This Is a Studio in Pran, Melbourne, part of Popplant Productions. Please make sure you follow the show on your podcast platform of choice and leave us a 5-star review. This will help others find the show. Also, please follow the association on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you want to add your voice to our ever-growing chorus of diverse cyber voices, have questions, feedback, or would like to be a sponsor, you can do so by emailing us at cybervoices@aisa.org.au. That's cybervoices@aisa.org.au. Are you an ASA member? If not, you should consider joining our network of over 12,000 members across Australia. An ASA membership can open doors, build professional networks, create lifetime friendships, and offer exclusive training, events, and other perks. Become a member today by heading to our website at asa.org.au. That is all for today. I hope you will join us again next time on Cyber Voices.